So this is the Project Airbus Wilco A380 Merge. The reason behind this video is that I fly this thing a lot on the VATSIM network, and it seems every time I do I get about 1 million private messages on there asking where did I get the aircraft from, how do they go about getting a hold of it, and how do you fly it. So I thought the best way to cover all that would just be to put it all together in a video. So until Matt Davies releases his payware A380 model, sometime hopefully in the near future, this is about as best as you're going to get. It's by no means up to the standards of PMDGs or the Aerosofts of the flight sim world, but then again it is freeware, so you can't really expect that. What it does offer is a VC, a fully functioning MCDU, with you can also get all the latest airac data from Navigraph, which is obviously essential if you're going to fly online. It's only for FSX unfortunately, but I'm sure someone out there will be able to get this working with P3D if they try hard enough. So yeah, I'm just going to cover briefly the install and getting the aircraft from A to B. So, first thing that you need to do is, if you have a peek in the description of the video, I've left a download link in there, just containing the install files for the aircraft itself. Once you've downloaded that, you should get a folder which looks something like this. So what you need to do is just refer to this file. The top section here is what you need to look at. I'll just briefly go over, just for the sake of it. So you'll start, if you see here, you can see the folders are labelled 1 through to 4. These are kind of the different segments that you need to install. Obviously do it in order. So you start with the first one, which is this Wilco Airbus Series 2. So just run this Airbus Series 2 FSX executable file and then activate it. Once that's installed and activated, you then move down to this, the second file down, which basically contains all the sim objects, effects, gauges, everything. You just select all these and copy them, and then go to your root FSX folder, which in my case is directly on my C drive. Just paste them in there, which I'm not going to do because they're already there, but you get the idea. Once you've done that, move down to this third folder down. So the VC rain fix. Basically, by default, this aircraft has an issue whereby whenever it rains, the cockpit windows lose the transparency, which is obviously a big problem. So to get around that, if you just run this executable file here, it's pretty simple to go through. It's just basically changing a setting which will fix the whole thing, and that's good to go once you've done that. So then you just move on to the last one. This isn't actually required, this is just optional. I do have this on because by default the landing and taxi lights on this aircraft are quite obnoxious and just overly bright, and basically when you're taxiing along at night on a taxiway, or when you come to land on a runway, it makes it really difficult to see the taxiway markers and the runway markers, which kind of defeats the whole object of having taxi and landing lights in the first place. So if you basically just go into this install new lights folder and then select the landing lights option, just run that executable there, and that'll fix the issue. If you go through that and at any point you want to revert that change, don't worry, you can. Just go back into this folder here and go on to this restore original lights, and just locate this landing lights one, and that'll just undo the change. So yeah, once you've gone through them four, the aircraft is essentially installed. I'm not going to go through how to install PFPX aircraft templates. There's plenty of videos out there that'll describe how to do that. So if you pause the video if you don't know how to do that, and then just come back. But basically the template files that you'll require are all in here, so get them installed into PFPX. In this video I use PFPX myself, so all I'm going to be doing is showing you how to plan the flight within PFPX. I'm not going to be using any other software. If you do use anything other than PFPX, then that's fair enough, but this good chunk of this video won't apply to you. So yeah, that's pretty much it. The only other thing to mention is, other than just paying attention to the install notes at the top here, if you have a look at the notes just below that as well, there's some pretty important information that you need to know in there, and pretty useful information. So do make sure you have a good read through of that before you just jump in the aircraft and try to start flying it, because there will be some stuff in there that will make your life easier when you come to do so. So now you can move on to getting your flight planning done. Like I say, I'm doing mine in PFPX. So just for the sake of quickness of the video, I've already been through and I've planned all my route and everything. I'm just going to kind of go back through it now, and I'm going to show you what I did with the payload and stuff, to just basically in order to calculate how much fuel we require. So I'll just go into plan here. So as you can see here, I'm using the A380 A61 variant, and the maximum altitude that I'm going to be climbing to today is flight level 410. So this is our route here. Before we get on to that though, I'll get into the payload settings. So the reason I've got this, the adults I've inputted manually as 490, and the baggage I've inputted manually as 7,474 kilograms. Reason being is because that takes the zero fuel here in PFPX up to 318,425 kilograms, and that's important because when you load the aircraft in FSX, if you don't mess with the payload settings and just leave them as the defaults with no fuel on board, that is the weight of the aircraft. So it just gives you the best accuracy when you're coming to calculate the fuel that you require for the flight. As long as you have zero fuel here, it's 318,425 kilograms. Then that's a pretty good start point. Like I say, I'm not going to go into too much depth of how to actually use PFPX. I'm just going to kind of assume that you know how to use it. I've been in here and I've done my route, so now that I've got my route, I'm going to export it. The reason I'm exporting it is because I want to just import a company route in my MCDU, as opposed to going through and inputting a million waypoints and airways into the MCDU. So this is the quickest method. So if you scroll down, the only way this will work is if you have this folder here ticked. This is the Wilco Airbus Evolution A380 FSX folder. You see the location of it there. Just make sure you have that ticked. This is basically going to be where the flight plan needs to export to in order for your MCDU to drag that in when you've got the aircraft loaded on the tarmac. So I'm going to export it as this. That's just the departure airport and the arrival airport, Amsterdam, Dubai, with a 01 on the end. Don't ask why. I usually just leave that on. I've never had any issues with leaving that on there. Just make sure you memorize the name here of the route that you've exported, because you will need to input it exactly as it is into the MCDU, or it'll just say it's not found in the database. So now you can just hit save, click OK on that, and that's exported. So with that done, we can pretty much now just compute the flight, release flight, say yes to that, and if you now go onto the summary page, you see here under release it's got 78,455. That is basically what it's calculated as the amount of fuel we will require for the flight. Personally, the way I normally do it, I would normally round that up to 80,000, and then additionally to that I would normally add about another 10,000 on, just for contingency, purely because I fly online most of the time and you never know what's going to happen on there. You could be put into a holding pattern because of traffic. You could have to do a couple of go-arounds. You just don't know what's going to happen. So that's just what I do. You don't have to do it, but for the sake of the video today, I'm just going to round that up to 80,000. And if you also make a note here, if you refer to this bit, you've got the takeoff weight at Amsterdam and the landing weight at Dubai. Make a note of those figures there, because they're gonna come in handy when we're calculating V speeds. But we'll come on to that once we've loaded the aircraft. So before you go ahead and load the aircraft into FSX, you need to actually go and have a look at the config file. I say file, it's actually an executable where you just basically go in and modify your preferences if you wish. So you can do this by going into the FSX folder in your C drive, and then into file there, and within that file there folder you've got an Airbus folder, and within that you've got this executable down here, which is the Airbus 2 config. Click into that. So you've got configuration, load manager, fuel planner and key config. You can ignore the load manager and the fuel planner. They only apply to the products that actually came with this Wilco Airbus series, which the Airbus A380 didn't. So we're going to look at the configuration. So in the configuration you can change things like your IRS alignment time. By default it says 20 seconds, which I've just left. If you want to make it maybe a bit more realistic, you can move the slider along and it'll take longer, or if you don't want to wait as long as 20 seconds you can move it down. It's just personal preference there. Then next down you have the unit system. I've got mine set to metric. You can, if you want, change it to imperial. You've got volume preferences there also. This MCDU keyboard input, so these settings here, so you've got an option of scroll lock, caps lock or num lock. So whichever one of those three keys that you select there, that'll be the key that will basically activate the ability to input from your keyboard into the MCDU. So I've left mine on scroll lock, but if you prefer you can change it to caps lock or num lock. This startup bit here, so for the flight today I'm actually going to put it into cold and dark, so I'll just select that there and you get that confirmation come up there. So the next time I load this aircraft it will be in a cold and dark state on the stand. If you don't actually do that before the flight, it won't load into the cold and dark state. The state it will load into is basically it has the engines running and everything else is yet to configure. That's probably if you want to get away quick, that's probably the mode that you want to load it into. You basically just need to make sure the APU is running and shut down the engines and start configuring the MCDU. But like I say, for today's flight I'm going to leave it on, I'm going to put it on cold and dark state, just so I can kind of go through and show you what you need to do from that config. So you got pushback options as well here, which I'm not going to modify, and I'm also going to leave off the option to pause 20 nautical miles before top of the descent, but obviously you can do if you want. I'm just going to OK that now. Just OK that again. So the other option I just mentioned was the key config. If you come into here, you actually got the option to assign keyboard shortcuts to different functions in the virtual cockpit, the FMC, all the ECAMs, etc. I haven't got any selected, but it does come in handy, I suppose, if you want to get around the issue with certain dials not being muddled in the VC. It's not a great deal of them that aren't muddled, but some of them, like I say, aren't. So this is an option to get around that by assigning keyboard shortcuts. I haven't done so. I'll show you my workaround for it later in the video when I load the aircraft, but I'm just going to come out with that for now. So now that you've got your options configured, you can go ahead and load the aircraft in FSX. So with your flight planning all done, you can now load the aircraft in FSX, which as you can see I've already done here. As well as that, I've got the departure airport selected here as Amsterdam. I'm using Active Sky Next Weather. I've got the time selected there, so I'm just going to go ahead and input the fuel. So if we come in to load the fuel tanks, so the best practice for this, to get the best centre of gravity when you're loading the fuel into the tanks, the best way to load the tanks is in this order. So you start with the left and the right fuel tanks. They are basically the main fuel tanks in the left and right wing, and then if you require more fuel than that, you then move on to the left and the right auxiliary tanks, which are smaller fuel tanks still in the wings near the wing tips. If you still then require more fuel, you move on to the centre tank, which is obviously just the main tank in the centre of the aircraft. If you still then require more fuel, you just move on to the centre 2 tank, which is towards the tail section of the aircraft. So yeah, that's the best way to do it. Like I say, it just gives you the best centre of gravity. So for today's flight, if you remember, we've got about 80,000 kilograms of fuel, so we will only require the left and the right tanks. If you could see there, the left and right tanks give you combined around about 100k, and we only require 80. So we're going to go ahead and first just take the rest of the tanks, make them empty to start with, and then we're just going to take these down to just over 40,000. We'll go with this. Yep, so that's all looking good, so just OK that. The payload, like I said earlier, I've got all these, I've got PFPX to match up to the default setting here, so I'm not going to make any changes to this, as you just don't need to. PFPX is already calculated based on what all these figures here are. So just leave that alone and OK that. OK again. And now it's time to load the flight, and I'll go into configuring the MCDU and getting the aircraft ready to taxi. So here we are in the aircraft in the VC. We're on stand Golf 9er at Amsterdam. If you have a little look around, first impressions, obviously if you're expecting something of the quality of PMDG products or Aerosoft payware products, you're obviously going to be a bit let down, but what you've got to bear in mind is that this is completely free, and with that considered, it is actually pretty decent. So, I suppose now we've got to go ahead and give the aircraft some power. What we do need to do first, though, is, although it is in a cold and dark state, we still need to make sure the engine master switches are all off. So, let's just get them down like that. That just means that when we go to start the engines up later, we won't have any issues. So once we've done that, we can now refer to the overhead panel. So like I mentioned earlier on this aircraft, there are a lot of the switches in the VC which aren't modelled, which is a bit of an annoyance, but there is a quick way around it. So the method that I use is for the overhead panel I would just press Shift and 4, and that would bring up this that you see here. This is basically a version of the overhead panel, which does have all the switches that you require modelled. And if there's a switch that isn't modelled on the centre pedestal, you would just press Shift and 3, and then all those switches there you can access. So basically pretty much anything else that you need in the cockpit is modelled, it's just those two that you need to be aware of. So let's get some power into the aircraft, let's get the batteries on. So if we refer to this section of the overhead panel, it's where all the battery switches that we need for this are located. The one that we're looking at initially is this one here. Just hover my mouse over there, and if we just click that down, straight away you hear that the battery switch has gone on and there's power to the aircraft. So I'm going to bring up the secondary overhead panel by pressing Shift and 4. So you see here we have life in the aircraft, and you can also see here that the external power switches indicate that external power is available. So we're just going to go ahead and switch those on. If you were going to wait a while before you put the APU on, it's worth doing that just so the power doesn't get drained from the battery. But in this case I am just going to go ahead and put the APU on. Wait for that to start up. So there you go, we've got APU available. So I'm now just going to take the external power away and stick on the APU bleed. So that's pretty much it. We've got power to the aircraft now. The only other thing that's left to do on the overhead panel really is to switch on the fuel pumps. I normally wouldn't do that at this stage of the flight, I would normally do it later on, but I just wanted to show you that. Basically when you come to, by the time that your engines are up and running, you don't want any warnings or anything to be on any of these switches. If you see anything like this that says fault, then you need to look at that and investigate why, otherwise you'll run into some issues. So yeah, that's pretty much that. We can now go on to the next part, which is configuring the MCDU. So at this point we can go over to the MCDU, and if you go to the initial, or init, so this is where we can start loading our company route, which we've exported from PFPX. So I'm going to run through that with you, but first just kind of a quick pointer to using the MCDU. If you in FSX by default, the ATC window is assigned to the scroll lock key, but also by default on this aircraft the scroll lock key is assigned to the function which allows you to input text into the MCDU by using your keyboard. So what I would recommend doing first is if you go into options and settings and controls in FSX, and just reassign the ATC window open and close key, just reassign that to one that's not assigned to anything, just to avoid it would be really annoying if every time you press scroll lock to enter text into the MCDU, if you had to then close the ATC window down. It's just not ideal. So once you got that done, you can click scroll lock, press scroll lock, and we can now input our company route. So we're flying from Amsterdam to Dubai, and if you remember our flight plan name had a 01 on the end, so we input there to company route and you can see it's picked that up. Our flight plan is Emirates 148. So for the cost index, so typically, I mean obviously every airline's different, but typically in the A380 they use a cost index of around 85, which actually gives you Mach decimal 85, which is easy to remember. So we're just going to type in 85 in for the cost index. If you have any step climbs in your route, you will always put into the flight level, you'll always put the last flight level that you'll step climb to. Don't put the initial cruise level in there, because that'll kind of mess up when it tries to calculate the top of descent later on in the flight. We don't have any step climbs today, so I'm just going to go ahead and put in flight level 410. Our alternate is Abu Dhabi. So with all that inputted, we can align the IRS, and we can clarify whether it's done that. So if you have a look here, you've got IRS align in, and then it'll just count down. See, at the moment it's on 5. It'll count all the way down. Just wait for that to complete. So you see there, the ILS align is complete. The countdown's complete there, and you can now see on the navigational display here, you can see our departure airport, Amsterdam here, and the aircraft aligned up on there. So we can go back down to the MCDU now. The next step is to go into the fuel prediction page, which on the MCDU is DEST. So if you click into there, so we now need to input the gross weight centre of gravity. By default it'll either not be there, which in this case it's not, or you might have the incorrect figure in, so always go through this step before you start your taxi. So just double click on there, and as you see, it's picked up those figures, so that's all good to go. So now we can actually go into the flight plan that we've just imported, and I'm just going to clear this discontinuity. To get this clear function, you just press backspace on your keyboard, and if I just hit that into there, that'll get rid of the disco. So now we just click on the departure airport, which in this case is obviously Amsterdam. Departure, so we'll be departing today from it's from runway 36 left, which is a bit unfortunate because it takes about 1,000,000 years to taxi out there, but never mind. So input that, and now you can select the SID that we're going to use. So the SID for today's flight is the RNM1 Victor departure. So select that and insert. So that's all in there now. Next we go to the performance page. So this is where we need to refer back to our folder, our install folder. Just going to bring that up here. Where is it? Here we go. So in this folder, if you refer to the V-speed chart, open that up. It kind of gives you a brief explanation of what to do here, but I'm just going to really quickly go over what we need to do. So the first thing we'll need is our takeoff weight. So if you go back to the aircraft, if you see here, we've got gross weight, and our gross weight is 398,300. So just make a note of that, and we'll come back to our V-speed chart. So the standard takeoff config is flap 2 config. There are other configs here, and it will explain what you need, what scenarios you'll use those in. But like I say, the standard is flap 2 for departure, so that's what we're going to use for today. So to determine the V-speeds, your V-speeds will depend on a couple of things. The first thing it will depend on is the elevation of the airport that you're departing from, which that's this part of the chart. The next thing is the temperature at that level that you're departing from, at the departure airport obviously, and then the next thing is the takeoff weight. So Amsterdam is pretty much sea level, so we're going to refer to this bit here. I'm using Active Sky Next, so to determine the temperature, I'm going to load that up, and you see here the temperature is currently 22 degrees. So we're going to be at sea level, and we're going to be in this first bracket here. So this is minus 40 to plus 35, so 22, so we're nowhere in this row here. And now we need to come back down to here, and we are in this bracket here. So that's our takeoff weight is in this range here, and we already knew that we were in this column. So we're gonna grab these V speeds here. So our V1 is 132, our VR is 138, and our V2 speed is 158. And we're going to input them into here. So 132 for the V1, 138 for VR, and 158 for V2. The transition altitude out of Amsterdam is 4,000. so input that there. We're going to specify flap 2 takeoff config in here. And the flex temperature, now there is no accurate way of calculating this. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. If you just pick a figure and input that, you normally find you get to the right flex setting. So I'm just going to go with 70 today. With that done, we're now pretty much configured. There's not really much else in the MCDU that you need to worry about. So you've initialized it, you've gone through your flight plan and your performance data, and you've got your fuel prediction page set up. So that's the MCDU configured. The next thing to do is we need to go to the autopilot panel. If you see here, we've got the QNH just set to standard, so we need to grab that. The QNH is it is actually standard, so we don't actually need to do anything with that. But at this point, if it wasn't, you would need to. If it was anything other than the default 1013, you would need to change it as appropriate. So in here, we're actually not in manage mode for the vertical speed on there. If you just double click this twice, it will put everything into managed if it isn't already. We're going to set the initial climb altitude now. Now if you don't change this, it's pretty much the same kind of standard thing across every aircraft these days, but if you don't change it, you obviously get increments of 100 rather than 1000 feet, and it just takes absolutely forever to increase the altitude. So just same as every other aircraft, just click the 1000 increment, and today we're going to move it up to our initial climb, which is 6000 on our departure out of Amsterdam. So that's, with that done, we can now go up to the overhead panel. Just make sure the beacon light's switched on. I've actually just done that before I unpaused and started the video again. So that's already good to go. And now we can request pushback from GSX if you're using it. If not, then I suppose you could just do the good old-fashioned Shift and P or whatever it is. I can't even remember what it is now because it's been that long since I didn't use GSX. But basically we're now going to push back and start the engines. So we're going to select that. We'll go with KLM. And the pushback direction is to the right. And we'll say no to that. So you can see there GSX is pulling up towards the front of the aircraft to begin the pushback procedure. I suppose just while that's doing that, we can. One thing that I did miss off before. We're not flying online here, so it doesn't really matter. But it's always best practice anyway, just so you don't forget. So we're going to. I don't know. I'll just squawk 5526 for the sake of it, and 122.8. So GSX should be just about ready to push us back.
Departure check completed.
There we go.
Flight has been inserted. Release parking brakes.
So we're going to release the parking brakes as he says.
Commencing push. All engines clear. Start that wheel.
So the engine master switch normally on an A380, I believe, is this switch up here, but as you can see it's another one that's not muddled, so that's fine. We'll just press Shift and 3 and we'll turn this engine start here to start, and as you can see down here, let's get a better view. As you can see, it's the engines are starting up there. We just need to give them some fuel, so we'll do that now. We'll simultaneously do engine 1 and engine 2 first, and then we'll wait for them to start up. So engine 1's pretty much stabilised there. Engine 2's coming up. I'll just wait for that before we provide fuel to the other two engines. So that's starting to level out there as well, so we'll now do engine 3 and engine 4. Give them some fuel and same will happen with them. And while we've been doing that, GSX has pushed us back. Looks like we're right on the taxi line, which is nice.
Parking brake.
So let's set that. Now you can see down here in the sub-airac cam, you can see we've now got a checklist that we need to go through. Before we do that though, we'll just quickly, now that the engines have started up, we can switch the engine master switch back to normal, and we can also
Unlocking gear.
take the EPU off.
Tow truck disconnected. Bypass being removed.
And yeah, you basically just need to follow this checklist down here. So you see at the minute all these things here are in blue. Anything that's in blue is yet to be done. Anything in green is done. So we already have the fasten seatbelt and no smoking signs on, so that's green, and we need everything else green. So just going to run through that. So the first thing we will do is we'll set the flaps to 2. See them going down there.
Left is clear. Right is clear.
And then next we'll use the auto brake. We'll set that to max for takeoff. Just move that up 1. The flaps are down now. Before I arm the spoilers, this isn't actually on the checklist, but it's kind of standard practice to do this. Just do a flight control check. So if you come down, see if I can get a bit of zoom on that. If you have a look on the lower ecam here, this is where we'll kind of determine whether or not the flight control check is successful. So we'll just start that with full left, full right, neutral, and full up, full down, neutral, full left, full right, and back to neutral. So that's all fine. So back with the checklist, we'll arm the spoilers. The takeoff test, I normally do this in taxi, but I'll just do it now. So shift and 3, again, you can't actually see it somewhere down here, the takeoff test button. I think it's there, but you can't press it. So, not to worry, shift and 3 and hit takeoff config. And you see there, that's takeoff config normal, so everything's green, so that checklist is done. And I think GSX has just given us the OK. So with that we will knock the taxi light on. I'm also just going to set the transponder to TARA now. And release the parking brake. And just gently advance the throttle forward to begin the taxi. Now in this aircraft, they usually try not to exceed 40% N1 during the taxi, and it might be tempting to go above that because obviously it's a heavy aircraft which takes a bit of power to get going, but if you just be patient it will start moving, as you see. We're picking up a bit of momentum here. So we're taxiing to 36 left. We'll just take this left here onto, I believe it's Bravo. and I'll not show you all the taxi because we'll be here all day if I do, because like I say, the runway is about 1,000,000 miles away. So we're now just about at the holding point for runway 36 left, and I just need to get around this corner here. So the way this plane takes off, if you've ever flown the Aerosoft series, the Aerosoft Airbus series, you'll find this quite easy because it's pretty much the same. If you haven't though, don't worry, because I'm going to explain it anyway as I do it. Let's just get around here. Right, so just before I line up, just quickly stick on the landing lights and strobes, and then we'll get lined up. Okay, so we'll just assume we've got takeoff clearance now. So the first thing to do is advance your throttle lever forward to about 50% N1. Just let that spool up. And then gradually advance it forward till you hear the second click. So there's the second click, so that's activated flex or the throttle mode. If you wanted toga, you'd just push your throttle all the way forward. So here we go down the runway. We just need to look out for our V speeds, which will appear on the PFD down there. So there's the V speeds coming into the picture. So there's V1 and rotate. So just gently rotate back. And there's positive kick rate, so we'll take the gear up. And you basically just follow the flight director. So it will just pitch to maintain the V2 speed of the aircraft, which is what it's doing now. So I'm now going to put the autopilot on, and we're being prompted to go into thrust climb mode, so we're going to bring that back till it clicks, and that's climb thrust selected. So now we need to immediately do a speed intervene and bring this back to about 200 knots. That's just so we get a decent rate of climb. And then take the flaps back to flap 1. And then just let the autopilot go back into manage mode, and the speed will go forward to about 250 knots. So at this point I'm just going to assume I'm cleared past the initial SID climb altitude and go up to the cruise level. So just right click on that there, and you see it's gone into open climb mode there, so take the flaps up and you'll see it'll just follow around the SID here. We've gone through 4,000 now, so we're going to put standard on the altimeter setting, and you can see here it does a nice early turn so that it doesn't have to do any sudden manoeuvres to get past these corners here. So you see out there as we reach flight level 100 in the PFD here, you see the plane sort of pitch down. That's to maintain its sort of final climb speed. So it'll pitch forward until it achieves that, and then it'll just go back to maintain and pitch to maintain that final speed there. So at that point we can also take the seatbelt signs off and the landing lights, and there's pretty much nothing else to do from there. The only other thing to mention is step climbs. So say for example we were cruising at flight level 390 and we wanted to be at flight level 410 by a certain waypoint. When we reached that waypoint we would just change it from flight level 390 over here on the autopilot to flight level 410. Just right click on the autopilot dial and that'll go back into open climb mode and it'll do your step climb. Apart from that, the rest of the cruise is pretty much automated, so there's nothing to worry about. I'll resume the video when we start planning our descent. So we're now flying somewhere over the Persian Gulf. It's time to start programming our descent into the MCDU. So we'll just go down to the MCDU. And we're on the flight plan page here. So I'm just going to start scrolling down. So you see our last waypoint here is VUTEB. So we need to clear the discontinuity straight after VUTEB. So scroll lock, backspace, get in there. And we need to input the arrival that we're going to be taking into Dubai. So if we have a look, the arrival that we're going to be taking is the VUTEB 3 Delta arrival for runway 30 left. If we have a look at the weather here, we've got more of a headwind coming in on the 30 left runway. It's typically the most used runway at Dubai anyway, so that's what we're going to go for. So if we have a look, we'll fly the rest of our flight plan until we reach VUTEB, and we'll fly this arrival on from there. So we've got some altitude and speed restrictions that we need to make note of. They should actually already be in the FMC, but if they don't match up to what's on this chart here, then we can program it accordingly. I'm actually using Navigraph here. It's the Navigraph charts desktop, but if you don't have this you can easily find charts online for pretty much every airport that you could fly into. So we're going to go back to the aircraft and I'm going to select the arrival runway, which is obviously Dubai. Click on arrival, select ILS 30 left, and we're going to scroll all the way down, and there's the VUTEB 3 Delta arrival. So we're going to insert that, and if we now just go to our plan mode and zoom in a bit there, and we just need to start sort of scrolling down to the bottom there. Actually, we'll zoom out a bit more so we can see better. So that's kind of, you can start to see our arrival there. So VUTEB is just up from here and we follow all the way down. This is the airport here. We kind of fly over the airport just down this way, and if you see here, we're supposed to kind of fly all the way down if we follow the arrival all the way and take a left turn and then join the ILS. We're probably not going to actually go that far down because we're flying offline. We're just probably going to go till we get about 4,000 feet around here, and then we're going to turn onto our base leg and then turn again to join the localizer. So that's briefly how it's going to work. We'll just go over the restrictions as well that were on that chart before. So the first one is VUTEB at 12,000 feet, 230 knots. So we'll just go back to the FMC. See, that doesn't quite match up to the chart. That's alright though, so we can just go into there. Get a better view here. So VUTEB, we need to be at 12,230 knots. If we go back we can see that's now in there in the FMC. We don't really need to worry about these speeds here because at this point I'm probably just going to go to, I'll do a speed intervene and I'll manually control the speed. I tend to do that anyway for most of the descent, to be honest, just so I have kind of more control over it and what to do. Sort of less automation, it's just my preference. So the next one, I think the rest pretty much matches up to what was on the chart there. So we've got this waypoint here, which is Lovelock. That's flight level 110, 230 knots. I'll just correct the speed there, just for the sake of it, even though I am going to manually do it. What's after that? We've then got Delta Bravo 529 8000. Yeah, we've got that. And patted 7,210 knots. 10. Let's correct that as well while we're at it. And then from there we go to Delta Bravo 532, which is 7,000, and then there isn't really any altitude restrictions from that point, it's more just speed restrictions. You see there, 185 by Delta Bravo 524. So Delta Bravo 532, 7,000. Yeah, and we'll just correct that speed down to 210 as well. Alright, so that's pretty much good. Let's go back up to where we are on the flight at the minute. You see here it's calculated our top of descent. I'll just show that in the plan mode as well. We'll go back to plan. If you scroll out we can see, so there's the aircraft there, that's our top of descent there where the white marker is. So we've got a bit of a way to go yet, but at least we've got it all calculated and ready for when we do reach that point. So come back out of plan mode. So as you can see there, our top of descent is pretty much bang on the waypoint DEXO. That is about 32 nautical miles away. So the way I would normally go about doing my descent is I would normally take the aircraft into vertical speed mode and just sort of manually take the vertical speed down. I'll show you how I go about doing that in a second, but if you would rather just let the aircraft descend itself and follow down its descent profile, you can do that. All you would do in that case is select your first descent altitude, like so, say it's 26,000, and then just select the autopilot dial there and the aircraft would start following its descent profile down. The reason I like to do vertical speed instead is because I like to start the descent about 20 nautical miles before the aircraft's calculated top of descent. That's just to give it more of a smooth descent rate. Like I said earlier, it does give you more to do during the descent. So we are actually around 20 nautical miles away from DEXO, which is where our top of descent is. So initially I am going to descend down to flight level 260, so I'm just going to start that now. And if we have a look back in the MCDU, we need to, at ITBUL it's calculated around flight level 260 there, that's why I've picked that altitude initially. So if we go back to here, and if we have a look there, that's pretty much bang on. That is just completely by fluke, by the way. I just selected a vertical speed there, and if you see this blue arrow here pointing at ITBUL, wherever that blue arrow points is where the aircraft has calculated that you'll reach this altitude. So that's pretty much bang on at the moment. However, if the position of this blue arrow changed, say if it went back that way, I'd need to increase the rate of descent a bit, or if it came back this way it would mean I would reach flight level 260 too early, and therefore I would obviously just do the opposite, just make it less of a, make the descent rate less. So yeah, that's pretty much how I go about it. So I'm just going to monitor that, make sure by ITBUL it's flight level 260, and then I think if I remember correctly it was flight level 120 by VUTEB. So yeah, I'll cut the video here again, and when I'm passing ITBUL I'll resume. So I've just passed ITBUL there. We're going through we're going through flight level 252 there. We just need to increase our rate of descent here so we can reach VUTEB at flight level 120. So I'm going to go up to the autopilot section, and I'm going to bring that down. So yeah, if we keep it round about that for the moment, you can see the blue arrow again there, that indicates that we're going to be around flight level 120 indicated there by VUTEB. We also need to start bringing the speed back because we need to be at 230 knots by VTEB. And I've obviously done a manual speed intervene, and I'm actually just going to control the aircraft speed for the rest of the way. You don't have to do that, you can just let the FMC do it, but I just prefer to do it this way. Again, that's just a preference thing. So I'm going to bring some speed brake up just to help bring the speed back a bit. And you can see that's come back quite nicely there. So with VTEB fast approaching, we're just going to go quickly down into the MCDU, and we're going to go to performance. And make sure you're on this approach section, and we're just going to go through and fill this out now. So we need all this data here, so the QNH is 1001. Temperature 31, surface wind 300 at 8 knots. The transition altitude needs changing from 4000, which was at Amsterdam, to flight level 130, which is the transition altitude for Dubai. Input that. The decision altitude I've got from the chart is at 260 feet. Stick that in there. We're actually going for config full landing here, so make sure full is selected, not config 3. And now we need the VAP speed. So we go back to this chart from earlier, and we refer to the VAP speed section. It's going to be roughly around 360. So it's probably a bit less, so we're going to go for this bracket here. So we're going to go for the VAP speed will be 138 knots, so we're just going to input that there. So we input 138 knots into the VAP. Come up here now, so flight level 120, so we just quickly need to change them standard there. Got QNH set there, and we need to descend now to flight level 110 by Lokov. And we need to keep the speed back. I'm going to set flap 1 just to help achieve that. And also at this point I'm going to switch on the seatbelt signs. As well as that, I'm going to come down here and we're going to change this auto brake to low for the landing today. Like so. So by Delta Bravo 529 we need to slow down to 210 knots and be at 7,000, so we'll just go and program that now. So we'll start slowing. Just gradually bring that down until we find that there. Was it 7,000? Let me just double check that. Ah, I was looking at the wrong thing, so Delta Bravo 529 we need to be at 8,000. That seems more right. So also, now that we've brought the speed back to 210 knots, we can go back to the MCDU and go back to the performance and activate approach phase. Basically do that once you start slowing the aircraft down, and now that we've reached 210 knots we can enter this approach phase, and we can I'm just going to go back to the flight plan page for now. So one other thing that I'll quickly show you, I'm just going to set this down to 7,000 now. Actually we need to be at 7,000 by padded. It's going to be quite a slow rate of descent now to achieve that, but that's fine. about that'll do. So one thing I just want to quickly show you is how to hold. I'm not actually going to do a hold here because we're quite far into the approach, but I'm just going to show you how to do it in the MCDU anyway. So say for example we wanted to hold at padded, just click padded, really straightforward, go into the hold, and you can set your criteria here, so whether it's going to be right or left turns, the inbound course, etc, etc. And if we just go back up here, you see there it's kind of previewed what the hold would look like, so we'd obviously just follow that hold round, but as I say, we're not going to do that. I'm just going to erase that and continue with the approach. Just take that rate of descent up a little bit. And then once we pass padded, we'll probably just level off at 7,000, keep it going at 7,000 until we cross over the airport. You can see the airport just ahead of us there. And then we'll gradually start our descent down, round about 4,000, and then start the base leg. So one other thing we need to do is we need to input our possible go-around data. So in the event of a go-around, you can see here on the chart we will climb direct to Delta Bravo 707, and then on track 284 degrees to EGNOT and hold at 3,000. So I'm just going to program that all into the MCDU. The way that you do this is to scroll all the way down to the end of your flight plan and just input it afterwards. So Delta Bravo 707, and then EGNOT. And we'd be holding at EGNOT. So that's the missed approach set, and we just need, as you can see, we're just passing over the top of Dubai airport at the minute, almost anyway. So I'm just keeping it at 7,000 there. So now I'm gonna start the descent down again to around about 4,000. And I'm also going to hit the ILS arm. So we're just descending down out of 4,000, and then we'll make our base turn. Start bringing the speed back to 185 knots now, with a bit of speed brake. And just as we're passing 200 knots, I'm going to set flap 2. Bring back the speed brake as well. So I'm going to take a bit of a shortcut here. I'm not going to fly this all the way around. As you see there, the glide slope's coming up, so I'm going to start making the base turn now. It's about 030 heading. start to bring that down to 3,000 now. And just slowly start to turn to capture the localizer. And we can now arm approach mode. And just let that capture the localizer there. The glide slope will follow shortly after, as you can see there. I'm going to just bring back the speed to 170 knots now. And as you can see there, we're just starting to capture the glide slope. So we're about 10 miles out now. It's all looking good. So we're on the ILS and the missed approach altitude there is set as 3,000. I'm going to just bring the speed back to 160 knots now. So I'm going to take gear down and bring the speed back a bit. Turn on the taxi light now as well. And we can now take flat full and bring the speed back to 138, which is our VAP. On the spoilers, and you can see there we've got all green, no blue, so we're good to land. So now for the fun part, I'm going to take the autopilot off and I'm going to fly the aircraft out manually from here.
300. Minimum.
Continue.
200. 100.
And idle the throttle.
50. 40. 30. 20. Retard, retard, retard. 5.
And we're down. Idle reverse. Manual braking from now. And we can lose the reverse thrust now. We'll not take that exit, we'll slow down a bit further. So I'm going to exit here and I'm going to take stand Foxtrot 2-1, which I believe is right ahead of us, which is mainly why I chose the stand, just for quickness. Okay, so overhead panel, landing lights off, strobes off, and we can bring the APU on. Spoilers can come down and the flaps can come up. Put the transponder in standby. I believe this is Foxtrot 2-1 just to the left here, which it is, so I'm also going to take the taxi light off now. Try and line this thing up at the gate. We can stick the APU bleed on and cut the engines. Can take the beacon light off, and we can also take the seatbelt signs off. Can also cut the fuel pumps. And that is pretty much that. So, in summary, for what you're getting, it's pretty good value considering it costs you absolutely nothing. This is the only freeware aircraft that I actually own. Most of the stuff is payware, but purely just because this is the A380 I thought I'd give it a go, and to be honest I don't regret downloading it. So, I suppose if you like what you've seen in this video, then by all means go ahead and download it. give it a go. If you have any problems with it, just leave me a comment and I'll try and get back to you and help as much as I can. If you're not interested by what you're seeing, completely understandable, because there is a certain amount of clunkiness involved with this aircraft, but it's just whether you can sort of overcome the clunkiness, which I did. I kind of just, it's second nature now. And yeah, so thanks for watching the video. If you like it, leave a thumbs up so more people can see it, and yeah, cheers.